I think that's working.
I think so.
Good evening, good evening. It's nice to see everyone back again. I mean, Adam Patrick is back.
Yeah, Anna Battery made a big hello, didn't he?
Every time, our number one fan, Adam Patrick. Rabbi, we've been doing these not regularly because we're back now after a long break. But can you believe it's been 4 years?
It's pretty crazy to think it's been 4 years. I don't know. It's like when COVID was happening, I don't know about you, but it felt like to me, we're just never going to make it out of this. Do you know what I mean? When we were in the thick of it, there was a certain hopelessness. That's funny. Now, like when you see some people and they still keep COVID things, people make all sorts of faces. You want to shake someone's hand and they don't want to shake your hand. And instead of just being gracious about it, people are like, COVID's finished. What's your problem? You know what I mean?
We forgot about it too quickly almost. But I
think
think Sunday Night Live, for me at least, was one of the more lovely things that happened during COVID, and one of the more lovely things that I think we did as a community as well. So
definite highlight.
Really, really proud of it. So, Rabbi, I tell you why we're back here. We're back here. Well, obviously, we're on the run up to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and that's notable in itself. I think it's worth commenting that this year has seemed like a really long year. I mean, it's almost it's crazy to believe that we're almost a year on in 3 weeks' time from the tragic events that happened on October the 7th. And a lot of the things that we're going to talk about and we're going to deal with, both in shul, outside of shul, a lot of people's minds are still there, aren't they?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'll give you an example, and I find this an interesting example because it shows you where people are at. I got a phone call from one of our members, made her nameless, and this individual says to me, Rabbi, I have a problem with your thought for the day. I said, that's okay, you don't have to listen. So the individual says, no, I just something specific. At the end of the thought for the day, you say to people, have a great day. How can we have a great day when there's people out there in Gaza, trapped in tunnels? How can we even say that? And whether you buy into that or you don't buy into that, whether you agree with that, you don't agree with that, but it just goes to show you where some people are up to, where some people in their head are up to, and they're saying to themselves, life has become so difficult. It's become so difficult to manage my emotions with everything that's going on over there. I'm really struggling with this.
I think life for a lot of Jewish people in the UK has changed tremendously so over the last year in terms of how they feel about being at home here or not being at home here, and the various different struggles and the change in the tone of the narrative, both politically on university campuses. I mean, it affects our children in terms of security at schools, etc., etc. And there's been so much of that going on this year that it's almost, like I say, it feels much longer than a year. And so somehow I think we need to sort of try and get a handle on all of those thoughts when we go into Yom Tov this year. And I think it was one of your thoughts of the day that kind of got me thinking, because I can't remember, forgive me, I can't remember which day it was, but on one of the days you said something like we didn't get the, or in one of the shurim you gave, that we didn't get the Rosh Hashanah that we wanted, or Rosh Hashanah didn't give us the year that we wanted this year.
I think it's in the message, so don't give it away, but it's going to be in the message.
Okay. That's where I saw it. I dreamed it was the thought of the day. But that got me thinking, though, that really is what, in terms of Jewish thought this time of the year, our New Year is very different to secular New Year's in terms of what we hope for, what we aspire to. But it's a time where we feel that at least the efforts that we make around that day set us up for the rest of the year, and sometimes we forget that. What hangs in balance?
Absolutely, and I think it's part of the reason people don't focus so much on Rosh Hashanah. Even when they focus on Rosh Hashanah, I don't know if they focus on it correctly. Say, yeah, Rosh Hashanah will come to shul, etc., etc. I mean, if you want to take this to the extreme, In the yeshiva, sometimes they used to say when somebody passed away, they say, well, he didn't die now in middle of March. He died on Rosh Hashanah. It just took time till March till it happened. Okay? It's actually interesting. We had last week, we had first call up. Zach Spieler, Charles Spieler, son got called up.
Yeah.
And I come into shul and I look across the aisle and Johnny Carr was there. Do you remember Johnny Carr?
I do remember Johnny Carr, yeah.
Good man, good man. Anyway, it was really nice to see him. Still a big smile. He's had his own struggles, quite big ones. I remember when Joshua passed away. I remember speaking to him at the time, et cetera, et cetera. And he's still, I was happy to see him in shul. And I thought to myself, when you haven't seen somebody in 12 months, the halacha actually says there's a bracha to be made. If you've not seen somebody in 12 months, you make a bracha mechaya mesim. Make a blessing, the one who revives the dead. Now, he wasn't dead. Johnny didn't die. Chas v'shalom, not a million times, But I'd not seen him in 12 months. He's been through a Rosh Hashanah. He's been through a judgment. We're now in a new year. It's like you're starting again. There's no guarantees. I think so many of us like to think we'll be here forever. I don't have to sort this out. I got more time to sort this out. I don't have to sort out my relationships with my kids. I don't have to sort out my relationships with God. I don't have to sort myself out because one day I'll get around to it.
Yeah.
And I think it really gets to the crux of the question that you asked in the title of this talk. Do you want to read out the title exactly how it went?
So I think it was 10 days for the rest of your life. So what would you do if you found that you only had 10 days to live? What would you change? How would you live differently? What would you do to make a difference?
Absolutely.
And obviously that figure of the 10 days is the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, where we're told everything sort of hangs in the balance. And yeah, what would you change? I suppose in your job, and we don't talk about this part of your job because it's an extremely intimate part of what you have to do, but you do come very often face to face with people who are literally at death's door, and you're amongst the last people that they get to speak to. It's a different perspective on life at that stage of where you realize you're at the end, and whether you're young or old, when that moment arrives, that's it. You don't have any more opportunities to do all the things that you promised yourself you would do. And I suppose it'd be interesting just to sort of know how we could use that time a little bit better.
Do you know what I find interesting about that? Because you mentioned about that visiting people as they're passing away. I find on the one hand, yes, it's a sad part of the job. I find it a very rewarding part of the job because I think people do get comfort from you being there, from you speaking to them, from giving them chizuk, from davening. Oftentimes when I get there, the actual individual that is on death's door is not conscious anymore. But I have people that I still have a very good relationship with today because of being around the bedside of a loved one of theirs. Like, Rabbi, I'll never forget that you came around when so-and-so was dying and we said Tillim together, whatever it was. I was just on the phone with somebody. Now I'm making phone calls. And I called somebody whose husband passed away quite some time ago, over a decade ago, right around Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur time. And I remember coming Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur to visit them. Remember Phil Morrison actually went to blow shofar for them. It was a very emotional time. And I think one of the things that happens the longer you are in this job is you start, even these kind of things, they don't affect you in the good way as they used to. You just don't see it the same way. The first few times I was there when somebody passed away, to be there for the family, to see this person, et cetera, it makes a change. When you've been in this job nearly 15 years, you say to yourself, which is, it's crazy to think that it's been that long, but you say to yourself, I've seen this before. And now this unfolds, so-and-so is going to be upset, and I'm going to say that. Again, I'm not callous about it, but I would say that I think enthusiasm is the wrong word, but the emotional aspect of it is certainly not as strong as it used to be. But I think at one point or another, especially when I'm in that room and people are speaking to the doctors and they've had all these conversations with the doctors and the nurses, et cetera, and the doctors basically say, look, there's nothing else that can be done. I've heard the least religious people in our community, not thinking about anybody specific, I'm just saying in general, say to me, Rabbi, it's up to Hashem now. Same person, like when you ask him about Hashem a few days ago, who are you talking about? But now they realize, yeah, it is up to Hashem. It's the only power that's left.
It's the only solace that's left. I suppose you kind of just have to hand yourself over to a higher power and hope that that's going to get you home, because
sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, I have seen people that have been literally on death's door, turned a corner, and lived for another 10, 15 years. You know, I've seen people also where they've said, like, you know, he's turned a corner, he's fine. 20 minutes later, they call me, he died. Like, but he turned a corner. I guess he turned the wrong corner. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a very, you know, we don't like talking about life and death because it makes us really uncomfortable. Most people don't talk about it. I'll tell you even more so. Sometimes you meet older people, and older people are pretty okay about talking about it. Do you know what I'm talking about? You see people that are like, when I go, you're like, where are you going? When I go. And you're like, you're not going anywhere. They're like, oh, Rabbi, I'm old. I'm going soon. And the way they talk going is like you're going to Tesco. They talk about dying like they're going to Tesco. Do you know what I mean? Have you had that? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I mean, I've experienced that with my grandparents, where I think that they, as they get older and more of their own friends and their kind of their peer group is also getting older, some of them dying, etc., and having to sort of go through all of that, it does, like you say, it doesn't, not to be callous about it, but it makes it more, I suppose it makes it a routine of life, that you expect that this is what's going to happen and that you're well versed in what these things are going to bring about. And I think there's probably towards I mean, at least this I take from direct conversations with my grandfather, because it used to fascinate me, because when I was a kid, if I was terrified of one thing, it wasn't necessarily my parents or anything. I was always very conscious of my grandparents dying, and I didn't want that to ever happen as a kid. So I would always constantly talk to them about that. And talking to my grandfather about it towards the end of his life, it was with a bit more of a stoic attitude. You know, he was 93. He'd been through everything that he'd had to go through. He was tired as well, and he sort of knew that it was his time and it was coming. So he could talk about it very unemotionally, and he you know, he almost knew what was ahead, and there's an acceptance that I'm going to
say, I'm ready. Did you hear that kind of thing? They say, I've had people say, Rabbi, I'm ready. Whenever it happens, it happens. And
Clive's in no rush, and neither should he be.
Absolutely. But Clive, you're not one of the oldies. You know, we're talking about people. I think people a lot older than you. Rarely do I find people Clive's age that talk like that. You'd have to add at least another decade to it, and sometimes even more.
I'd say Clive's so old we don't even know what his true age is. So going back then to the point, I think that a lot of people they have certain expectations that, you know, if you're going to live to that ripe old age. So let's say you are going to be 93, and when it comes, it's time. Nobody can argue that you haven't had what we call in England a good innings. But the point is that you don't always get to look forward to it at that ripe old age. Sometimes it comes a lot sooner for some of us, and in some cases it comes without warning. It's not always that lovely sort of loving, calm, tender, peaceful last moments, and so life can be very cruel like that, and we have no way of knowing when that's going to happen. And literally every day that we wake up could be that day where that happens. And I don't think we have
like that, though.
We don't have that. Somehow I think as human beings we put that out of our minds, because I think
But I
I
don't
think
think
maybe
you
that
can
will
live
put a
like
lot
that.
of pressure on us.
No, but you just can't live like that. If you live like, look at Ian's comment. However morbid it may sound, you have to treat each day as it is your last.
Yeah.
Right? That sounds very morbid. I would go one step further, and that is actually, if you lived every day like it was your last, either you'd run out of steam to living every day like it was your last, or you'd go absolutely mental. I think part of, especially being maybe our age, is that we don't think of it like that. Because if I thought of my day as being my last, if I woke up tomorrow morning and said, today's my last day. If I woke up Tuesday morning and said, today's my last day. I don't know that I could have that. I don't know that that's a healthy attitude to wake up and to say, today's my last day. You might want to put in the energy like if it was your last day, but to live every day like it was your last day, it's hard. Do you not find that would sort of really get you
It
down?
is hard, and that's why I've given you 10 days in this
Uh-huh.
biblical context and
Yeah.
not one day. And I think that is interesting, because I think if you've got one day, literally one day, then you have to prioritize. And I would imagine it's all about prioritizing speaking and saying, which I think is probably the hardest thing, saying goodbye to people and having those last words. But you've got 10 days here to make a difference. And what's Clive saying? Live as though every day was your last, but plan that you're going to live forever.
Interesting. Okay. That's trying to sort of straddle both sides, isn't it?
So yeah, so I guess from your perspective, then what is it that we do at this time of the year? Because when I read what you'd written, and obviously it's a bit of a spoiler, but when that address comes out, people will read it for themselves. But when I read it, it did make me sort of take a step back and think, hang on, Rosh Hashanah is not just 2 days of overeating and a bit of a schlepped out davening. This is actually a more serious day, and it almost should be as sober, if not more so, than Yom Kippur in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we don't always get that, do we? Because we've Rosh Hashanah we've turned into, as it should be, a celebration. Your apple, your honey, the kids singing songs. It's all about that. But that gravity of what is literally what is being judged on those days, sometimes it slips away from us.
And in Halacha, actually, there's a lot of discussion about this, how to try to straddle both of those sides. On the one hand, the seriousness of Rosh Hashanah, and on the other hand, still realizing it's a Yom Tov. Nobody is not calling it a Yom Tov, on the one hand. On the other hand, it's a Yom Tov where we're being judged, because Yom Kippur is not the day of judgment. Rosh Hashanah is the day of judgment. Yom Kippur is the day of atonement. But Rosh Hashanah is really the day where you're being judged. And so you say to yourself, if Rosh Hashanah is the day I'm being judged, I don't know about you, but if you had a big court case and you had to go 9 o'clock in the morning to court, you'd be there 8:30. You'd be there nice and early. You'd be there in your best suit. You probably will have skipped breakfast because you'd be so nervous. If somebody's going to try to call you up and say, David, it's just a joke. It's not a joke. I could end up in prison for the next 25 years. This isn't funny, right? You'd be very, very serious. And yet, at the same time, with all that seriousness, we also have to take into account it's Yom Tov. We have Yom Tov meals, dip the apple in the honey, the challah in the honey. There's something about having a sweet new year. It almost sometimes some of the things become almost juvenile. You have like a head of a fish, so that you should have a simon for a good head of the year, and you should have whatever else it is. You have carrots and you have black-eyed beans, all these different things that you have in halacha that are simon and milsa to give as a symbolism. Symbolisms are very nice, but if you had something serious going on, I'd struggle with symbolism. I'd be like, scrap the symbolism, just get me my lawyer. Let's sit together. Let's get it straightened out. It's a scary time.
I think that symbolism is the nice side of it, isn't it? So it alleviates the heaviness, because it's all about almost like abundance, isn't it? It's about health. It's about prosperity. It's about all of those things that we try and sort of wish each other at that time of the year, and we never really sort of take in the seriousness of the whole situation. So given that we have this period of time, and there is that period of, and not many court cases allow for that, where you turn up and you have your court case, but then you've got 10 days after that to effectively make your case and to try and sort of mitigate the judgment almost. Where do we start? Where do we start, and what's your advice to people in terms of making those 10 days count? What are the important things that they should be focusing on? Because you can't do everything.
Absolutely. Okay, so let me start with the following. It's actually interesting. I had a conversation with someone today about it, and I said, if you had 10 days left to live, what would you do? And the individual said, I got so many places I wanted to travel to that I've never been to. I travel. And I just sat there like with my mouth gaping open wide, like, you have 10 days left to live and you're going to see the Alps? They were like, yeah, but I've never seen the Alps. I'm like, okay. But I think in my head, and this is really where I'd start, is that all of us have what I like to call unfinished business. Okay? Everybody's got something that we will consider unfinished business, and different people will look at this unfinished business as different things. So for this individual that I was speaking to, they believe the unfinished business that they have is the fact that there's certain places in the world that they have not seen yet. And they have a certain amount of money that they set aside, but they need that to live on. But if they knew they had only 10, if you had, I don't know, let's make a number. It's not even a big amount, for traveling, but let's say you had 20,000 pounds.
Yeah.
And you're living on that 20,000 pounds. So it's not a lot of money. But if you had only 10 days left, you'd say 20,000 pounds is a heck of a lot of money for 10 days. I could actually fly somewhere else every single day. I might even be able to afford a business ticket in there somewhere. I might be able to do something. And if at the end of the 10 days, I spend the 20 grand, I die, and that's the end of it. So it's no big deal. So my unfinished business is, let's go and visit all the places that I've always wanted to see and I've never been to see. So that is something that people would do. You could ask people, what else would you do? I've never been to a certain restaurant. I've never been to see certain movies. People would give you also, can you now imagine there'd be lots of people that would have all kinds of different things that they would come up, and in their head, that's unfinished business. And I believe that everybody has to think to themselves and say, well, what is really my unfinished business? Because we had a very good friend. I don't know if you might have known him. Did you know Avram Beagle, Oliver Shawn?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you know Avram Beagle?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Avram Beagle, I remember exactly when Avram Beagle passed away. It's coming up to 10 years now. My son Aaron had his upshare, and that was one of those weekends that sometimes you have a weekend that you never forget because of all the turbulent things that happened that weekend.
Sure.
So that weekend started. My mother came to our house for this weekend for the upshare. Friday, I'm about to go to School Road to get a phone call from a friend of mine who's in Natsal. He goes, hi, your mom's outside Royal Bake. Do you remember Royal Bake on Barry Road? Yeah. She's outside Royal Bake and she fell. I think you should come.
I remember that. Yeah, Pardon? She broke the leg, right?
She broke her ankle in 3 places. It was called a Potts fracture. I'm not sure why it's called a Potts fracture, but that's, they got called, but you feel like a Potts once you have it. That's it. I don't think that's what it's named after. But I get there, and my mother's on the floor, and David Lehman's with her, and he says, I think you need to get her to a hospital. I'm like, oh, goodness gracious. I got an upshare. I got my sister-in-law and brother-in-law from Antwerp with their family here. We got all these people Friday night by us for Shabbos. My mother's just fallen, and I took her to the hospital. And they're like, we're not sure. They took an x-ray. They said she had the fracture. They had to maneuver. They sedated her. They had to maneuver her bone in a certain way so that she'd be in the right place. And then they said they needed to do an operation, but they couldn't do the operation until Sunday. They put it together. I was with her Friday night. I had to make kiddush for her. Like, I had to call. I'm saying, like, I'm missing my own simcha at home.
Yeah.
Then I walked back home at Friday night, Suda, at home with my family, walked back Shabbos, drove back Motzei Shabbos, had the big upshare, and then Sunday morning, my sister-in-law and brother-in-law said, okay, this was very, very nice. Remember, I think that was the first big event we had with the Belzers. It was such a fantastic event that we had. I think it was coming off the back of Shabbat UK. I can't remember what it was. I think it was off the back of the first Shabbat UK. It was just a brilliant event. And then my sister-in-law and brother-in-law, who were very, very close to the Beagles, They went away. They said, okay, we're going back to Antwerp. They started driving. Someone got a phone call, we're coming back. And Aaron Bigler passed away. Right? And it was, and I remember after he passed away, people said the strange thing was that there was a whole bunch of different things that he'd been procrastinating for a long time. And the week before he died, he literally finished all that business. I don't know if he owed somebody money or somebody owed him money. He had to sort something out. Loads of stuff he had to sort out. He sorted out. And on Sunday, he died. And I remember at the Shiva house, people pointing towards that and saying he had certain unfinished business in his life. The neshama must have known that it's on its way out. And it just got itself going. And it just took care of whatever it is. And I believe all of us have unfinished business in this world. Whether it is somebody that we've had an argument with. Some of us have had arguments with people, and we've always said to ourselves, one day I'm going to make shalom. One day I'm going to sort it out. One day I'm going to sort it out. But you know why we say one day I'm going to sort it out? We go back to what we said before. Right now, I'm alive. I'm not going anywhere. So-and-so doesn't talk to me. Who cares? It's not a big deal. Until you get to 10 days before you're passing. And suddenly you say, you know what? Do I really want to die with somebody in a burgers with me? Should I not go back to that person and say to them, you know what? I've got 10 days left to live. I made mistakes. You made mistakes. We said things that we shouldn't have said. Let's let bygones be bygones. I don't want to leave this world with machlokes on my head. I'm sure that many people out there, that when that happens, when that time comes, suddenly they pick up the phone and they're willing to have that conversation with someone. But it's taken all that time to get to that point. And that's an example of unfinished business. That I would say that somebody who has gone through their whole life and made mistakes, and we all have made mistakes, some of us bigger ones than others, but everyone has made mistakes. And we say to ourselves, you know what? Certain mistakes I wish I could fix. And by the way, not every mistake is something that you can fix. There are certain mistakes you'll never be able to fix. And even on the deathbed, you call somebody up and you say, I'm dying. I'd really like to ask you for forgiveness. And they'll say, run in hell.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but that's what it is.
It is unfortunate. But like, so without talking about specifics, you and I often talk about this because I some people might consider it one of my weaknesses, but I never sort of give up trying to sort of patch it up with people. I can honestly say very few people, either through shul or professionally or friends. I'm lucky enough to say that I've not had many contentious situations where I've fallen out with people. But I always feel this need to, if that is the case, to try and sort of patch it up. And
you probably have that from your grandfather. And your grandfather was one of these very, very popular people, and I don't think there are many people out there that had gripes with him either.
Maybe. Listen, he was extremely nice and patient man. So I don't think too many people had a reason to get into gripes with. But you know, you have fallouts with people over time, and there are differences of opinion. And to me, I think I would never sort of want to give up on being able to make those apologies, or even to. It's not necessarily about making an apology, because it's more about trying to get that person to almost compromise on their point of view, to the point where you can both appreciate what you do have in common rather than what you are separated on. And I think that you need to keep going with that. It's harder. As you said, you know, some people will get to the end of their life and just through pure bitterness will not let go of that anger and that sort of, and that's a waste of time.
I think it's a real waste of time. I think holding on to grudges in general is a waste of time. I think there are times people do something to us that are not right. I'm not going to lie and say that everything that's happened to me has always been handy-dandy. I've been treated badly. And I would say I was on the giving end at times also. There have been times where I have treated people badly. But I think being able to raise your hands and say, you know what, I treated you badly. I'm apologizing. I'm really sorry that that's what happened. And I'd like to make amends. I think that's a big thing. And I think the more intransigent you are and the less you're willing to move on your position, the more at the end of your life, you'll realize that you don't have one unfinished business. Because lots of people have one person they don't speak to. But then there's always that one person you speak to and you say, yeah, I've fallen out with one or two people. They're like, one or two? I got 50 people I don't speak to. And you're like, 50? How did you do that? And then the funny thing is, when you got 50 people that you don't speak to and you say each one of them is a potz and each one of them is an idiot and each one of them has their own problem, sometimes you have to think about the guy who's driving against the wrong way on the motorway. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, where all those arguments, the common denominator is you, then you have to start asking yourself some questions.
Yeah, but I find that oftentimes these are the people that ask themselves the fewest questions. And that's a problem. Because really, and this is going to be the next part of it, is that number one, finding where your unfinished business is. Number two, then starting to ask yourself questions. So I got unfinished business, let's say, with X. Not giving a name, and I'm not saying that I have or I don't have unfinished business, but let's say I have unfinished business with X. And now the next question you need to ask yourself is, how did that happen? Why did I fall out with him? Excuse me, how can I patch it up? How can I maybe see this from his side? Does he have a point? Because see, very often we just feel that the other side has no point whatsoever. And I don't believe that to be true. Rarely have I found in an argument that the other side is not making a point at all. They are making a point. You might not agree with their point, but they're not just standing up and saying, I'm angry with you. Why? I have no reason. So why are you angry with me? Just I decided today, today's an angry day, so today I'm going to be angry with you. Tomorrow will be somebody else. Right?
Yeah. And I think you're right.
You deal with ridiculous people.
But the people that hang on to those arguments the longest, they are often the people who have the most conviction when it comes to the veracity of their feeling about how bad or how, they feel very passionately about the issue, whatever it is. It's extremely personal to them.
That's true. That is true. And I think on the one hand, having those passionate feelings, I think it's a double-edged sword. See, people with passion are, on the one hand, great people because the passion allows them to do stuff that other people will never do. You see somebody who's passionate about their job. You see somebody who's passionate about their religion. You see somebody who's passionate about their spouse, whatever it is. They have a different sort of relationship than somebody who's just like blasé about it. That's certainly true. But the double-edged sword is sometimes they're passionate even when they shouldn't be. And that's where it goes wrong. So now you need to sit and ask yourself a question. Well, I got unfinished business. I got a problem with X. And then you say, so, well, if I have a problem with X, why do I have a problem with X? What's gone wrong there? So you could conclude that he's just an idiot. He doesn't understand anything. Or you could say, and again, I found this again and again, I've rarely found people that are unreasonable. I don't find that maybe they might not reason like you do, but very rarely. Pardon?
They have their own logic.
Correct. You just call them unreasonable because their logic doesn't equate with your logic. So you're saying they're unreasonable, but they're not necessarily unreasonable. They just don't reason like you do. And I think it's important for us to realize that there are people out there that are behaving a certain way because of certain things. I think we spoke about this. I spoke about this on Tuesday night. We had a session in Brackman's. And I spoke about this, that on Sunday night last week, I was invited to speak to a bunch of boys that are really going through real struggles. Boys that we would call off the derech or whatever you want to call them, going through their own struggles on their own journey, call what you want to. And some of these boys have taken massive strides. Some of these boys are still stuck in their situation wherever they are. And I was trying to talk to them and I got ignored, but not just ignored. People are throwing stuff at each other, swearing at each other. It was like, it's a real wake-up call. And on the other hand, I find like for me, it's important every once in a while you go there just to give yourself a reality check.
It's a humbling experience,
It's a humbling experience. Not everybody wants to hear what you have to say. People will swear you straight in the face. You're not God's gift to humanity. Go somewhere and get yourself some humble pie. It's worth for every single person. That might be one of the things I need to get on my list, right? Getting some humble pie before you die. Yeah. But humble pie I think humble pie is a good thing, right?
Hugely,
Because
yeah.
if you never ever get a slice of it, then you often have a very inflated sense of self. And I think we've had this conversation about snowflake generation, et cetera, et cetera. I think, and part of it is a lot of people will say that they've never been given a slice of humble pie. Whereas the other side, I think the snowflake generation will say, what do you mean? I've been given cakes and cakes of humble pie, not a slice. I've been given like a whole freezer for all of them.
What I'd say is, and I think this is the truth. If you don't get yourself a slice of humble pie before you die, when you die, that is the biggest slice of humble pie you can ever be served. You just won't be around to eat it. Yes. Because we all leave this earth with nothing.
Correct.
The same way we came into it. And it doesn't matter what you've done in your life, you're going to leave it the same way as the next guy and the next girl and the next. We all, it's a great common denominator. It doesn't matter who you are. We all leave the earth in the same way. And it takes away that power.
On the other hand, we leave behind. Today it was very, very nice. We had the unveiling of a stone for Uncle Moshe. You remember Moshe Gross? Uncle Moshe?
You do very well. One of my neighbors, yeah.
Yes, correct. So today we had the unveiling of a headstone in his memory. And then they've redone, he's left money for Vine Street. He's endowed him some money to redo the Beis HaMedrash, which has looked like a dungeon for years. And is looking much, much nicer, thanks to the people that put the work into it. Yitzi Spielman, Benny Silverman, Moshe Noe, like the guys, the young clever over there. They've really done a beautiful job redoing that Beis HaMedrash. And it was very nice seeing how somebody has passed on, and a year later, their effect is still being felt all around Manchester.
So that's the idea of legacy, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That's what you leave behind.
Absolutely. And I guess that might be part of the conversation also. So there's unfinished business, there's thinking, there's legacy, there's humble pie, there's all these bits and pieces that we could add to the thing. So let's just go back to unfinished business, then move on. So you have your unfinished business, you've had some thoughts. You thought about it now and you said to yourself, maybe the person wasn't as unreasonable as I thought they were. And maybe that person had a reason why they did what they did. And maybe that was a reason why they said what they said. But if you had only 10 days left, you'd say to yourself, I don't want to die with this cheshbon open. I know that somebody came to me and he said to me, they wanted to borrow money, for example, from Uncle Moshe. He was a very charitable man in his lifetime. He helped many people on their feet. And somebody said to me that they wanted to go to borrow money from him. And I said, no, I don't think you're going to get much from him now. He's already getting older. He came back and he said, I don't want to leave any unfinished business for my wife. I don't want to leave my wife with bills having to go catch 10 grand from this guy and 25 grand from that guy. It's just this unfinished business. People don't want to die with that.
What Clive has said, unfortunately, it is often too late for people who have only a very short time to live to do anything like you are suggesting, as they are so sick. That's true.
That's true. But then it goes back to what you said before. Live as though every day was your last. That means to say life is too short to have a million rows with a million people. You're just so much better off having shalom. Shalom is the way to go. And as you know, David, you spoke about it before, and we've spent a lot of time talking together and discussing peace together and things that have gone on in shul and how to try to resolve in the most diplomatic way. And I think you are one of the most diplomatic people out there, certainly in our shul. And it's a tremendous gift that you have. And the gift is that you're trying to say to yourself, I don't actually want to be in an argument with anybody. If my attitude is, if I said, well, if I died, I'd have all this unfinished business to fix, my attitude should be, actually, I don't want to live my life having to regret all these things and try to fix them in the last, it's like saying, oh, I mistreated my money. I racked up £500,000 of credit card debt and I want to fix in the last 10 days before I die. Good luck. Right?
Actually, that's the
live with
one bit
fiscal
I'll be happy to
responsibility.
leave behind.
I'm sorry?
I said that's the one bit I'll be happy to leave behind. Let the
That's a
credit.
real legacy. You've left the legacy.
That's a legacy. Good luck. Get out of that one. But I think that, you talk about credit card debt. So we often refer to debt as being almost like it's a heavy burden that you have to carry,
Yes.
and it's constantly worrying you, and you're constantly having to sort of nurse it and feed it, and it never really goes away. And that's why settling debts is so important even in a religious context, because it gives you peace of mind.
100%.
And people worry tremendously. So we're
100%.
we're very sensitive about that. But when it comes to sort of personal debts and the baggage that the mental baggage that we carry around, so those arguments that you're talking about, those take their toll. So if you are the kind of person that does have umpteen arguments with people, and you're going to schlep that to your dying day, it's a lot to carry. And you can see very often in families the destructive effect that those arguments and those principles can have. And sometimes you wonder why.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And not only that, when you come to Simcha and there's like 6 tables you can sit at, there's people, Baalei Simcha, have told me one of the hardest things to do, we've not had to do this yet, but hopefully Mitzvah Shem soon, but one of the hardest things to do is to make a table plan for Simcha. Have you ever made a table plan for Simcha?
I always leave it to Ian Creek. He's superb at table plans.
Ian Creek is superb at table. But table plans are very difficult because people want to sit with different people and certain people don't, And the funny thing is sometimes Reuven wants to desperately sit with Shimon, and Shimon comes to Ian and says, the last person I want to sit with is Reuven. Do not put me on Reuven's table, whatever you do. And now Ian's got to sort that out, that somehow Reuven's on Shimon's table and he's not really. And it's very, very hard. Because you go to Simcha and there's like all these people that you don't talk to. It's very, very hard. I find, like you said, like it takes a mental toll. There are individuals that are upset with me. Yes, there are individuals that are upset with me. It's unfortunate. I wish I could make the peace, but there are individuals upset with me. And it's very, very difficult to walk past people and to wish them good Shabbos and either to be ignored or to get a good Shabbos like, good Shabbos, Mamzer. That's what you feel like. They're saying, okay, I have to say good Shabbos because I'm not going to ignore you entirely, but I wish you just looked away.
Yeah.
And there's a mental toll to that. Like, to me, it feels like I don't want to be lugging that around. I'd rather just be able to take all of that pain and move it on. So I think I'd like to move on, I think, from this part, I think, because we have done a lot about this, and I think it's really, really important. But then in addition to that, I want to give it maybe a little bit more of a religious slant also.
Go for it.
So let's talk about other things that we could add to this list. Okay? People say, there are certain books I want to read before I die. There's certain films I want to see before I die. Have you ever seen those lists, 10 films you have to see before you die?
Yeah. 10 books you need to read today. Yeah, all those things.
I don't know why they say 10 films you need to see before you die. Like, what's going to happen if I die and I didn't see that film? Like, or I didn't read that book? Like, I'm not sure. But I guess they're saying if you're going to choose 10 books to read, these should be the 10 books that you read before you die. Okay. Listen, if I had 10 days left and I knew I was dying, the last thing I would be doing maybe is reading. I'd say to myself, well, that feels like a waste of time. All that information is just going to be wasted because I'm going to die. It's just going to go to my grave with me. Now I feel a little bit better that I now finally understand equals MC squared, and then I died after that. So I don't know if that's, but there are religious things that people will do also. And I think this is the other point that's very, very important. See, they like to say there are no atheists in foxholes. Whether it's true or not, I've never been in a foxhole to know. But certainly they say, there's many times that people say, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in God. And suddenly a relatives of theirs get sick and they're like, okay, I'm putting on tefillin. You're like, you're putting on tefillin? You told me you don't believe in God. He goes, I'm hedging my bets. Have you ever heard people say that?
I think it's one of the most commonly used phrases. And I think, even if you were to look at traditional 3-time-a-year jewelry, if you like,
yes,
it's the ultimate hedging your bets. You
Yes.
turn up on Rosh Hashanah, you turn up on Yom Kippur, you're hedging that bet.
Yeah. That's absolutely true. But you say to yourself, I'm hedging my bets. Anybody who tells you they're hedging their bets is not an atheist. Right? I remember there was a fellow from Whitefield that I used to learn with, and he told me he was an atheist. And yet every single time I called him, this was before I was before I became rabbi, I was still in Whitefield College at the time.
Yeah.
Every time I called him up, I had a cancellation. He said, "Look, I'm not taking a fixed session with you." I'm like, "No problem." He said, "But if you have a cancellation, call me." I would call him at 6 o'clock in the afternoon and said I had a cancellation. He was there at 6:45. I said to myself, for the fact that you don't believe in God, you're pretty quick to show up here almost every single week. I don't believe that you don't believe in God. I don't believe it. That's just bravado. It's just saying, like, it makes you feel bad. He says, "Oh, I'm an atheist." It's because it can give you an excuse why you don't do certain things. But the same people, the same atheists, will suddenly say, "Rabbi, you need to daven, or Rabbi, it's in God's hands." And you're like, in God's hands? Who's God? God doesn't figure, I know he figures
I have a
he does figure
question.
in my books, but not in yours. Go on.
I have a question. Do you need to believe in order to do these things? So if you wake up at the last minute and you say, right, I'm hedging my bets, so I'm going to daven, or I'm going to wear tefillin, or I'm going to take this on or that on, or whatever it is that you say that you're going to do, does it matter that you don't believe at that point?
So what I would say is as follows. I honestly believe that anybody who does these things because they're hedging their bets is lying to themselves that they don't believe. Because if I told you, if you said, you know what, I'm going to hedge my bets, and so therefore I'm going to sit on a tree stump and I'm going to start chirping like a bird, and that's how I'm going to hedge my bets to get
What
into
you're doing
heaven.
is you're opening yourself to the possibility that there might be. That's what you're
Right.
saying.
Yeah. Yeah, but you are opening yourself to it, but you wouldn't do something that you thought was absolutely loony and nuts. You just wouldn't. If you said to yourself, this is absolute nonsense, I would not hedge my bets with absolute nonsense. You just wouldn't, right? There's certain people that will come to you, even if you had 10 pounds left and a guy came to you, certain people came to you and says, "David, you give me this 10 pound, I'll give you back 1,000 pounds. I promise you, I swear whatever they'll say to you." Certain people, you'd never give them that 10 pounds. So he promised you 100-fold return on it. That 10 pounds in this guy's hand, lost money. It's gone. It's down the toilet. That this guy has nothing to show for that. And if you're willing to put on tefillin, or if you're willing to daven, or if you're willing to come to minyan, or you're willing to say Kaddish, don't tell me you don't believe. Now, do you have a deep sense of belief like some other people? Absolutely not. I think we can all agree on that. But if you want to tell me you're an atheist and you don't believe at all, I will tell you straight out, you're a liar. You're just a liar. Because if you believed it was zero, zilch, nothing, you just wouldn't bother. And the fact that you bother means that maybe somewhere deep down in your subconscious, you say to yourself, maybe this is not as crazy as it sounds. I might not have lived my life like that. It might not have been something I've done all the time. But now, we'll come back to that, right? But now that my back is against the wall, it's time for me to live my life that way. Let's see, what did Clive say?
Clive has said that belief without proof requires unquestioning faith, which is the most difficult for any of us to achieve.
Absolutely. But I think the answer to that question is that most thinking, believing people will believe because they feel that they have something that resembles proof for them. Certainly, that's what I feel. Now, do I have incontrovertible proof? Do I have something that I can say that 2 + 2 is 4 and you can't argue with it? No, because if I had that, then I'd be able to convince everybody that there's a God. And will I understand everything that God does? Also not. But I think belief requires a certain amount of proof. And then you get to a certain threshold where you say, okay, that's good enough for me. Because in almost everything else you do, you'll say that. If I'm asking you to make an investment, you'll ask questions. Sure, you'll ask questions. At one point or another, when I've satisfied all of your questions, you will go back and say, you know what? Fine, I'm willing to invest that money with you.
But
However,
at some point, that faith, though, is that trust. I mean,
yes,
I don't know exactly how you're going to do it, but I know that, so in an investment scenario, if I trusted you the first time and you came good on it, that's a proof. The second, third, fourth time, I don't need the proof because I have faith that you're going to do the right thing.
yeah, hasn't that happened that the fourth time I've gone bust? You've
Sometimes
proven.
as well, yeah.
No. So I'm saying, like, it's not a guarantee. Just because you got a good track record doesn't mean that you're always every investment you're going to do is great. I know people that have invested in one thing and it's gone well, and another thing has gone well, and the third thing has gone well, and everything's amazing until they invest in number 6 or number 7 or number 10, and that one didn't go well. So, it's not like we don't have a promise that it's going to go well. So a track record, you say to yourself, is like there's a certain track record that I believe that I see in God. And then it says, he's got a track record as far as I'm concerned. Do I understand everything on his track record? No, but I think the track record is strong enough for me to say I'm willing to go along with it. And I think that's true for every investment. If I showed you all the numbers and they all made sense and you invested, is it still possible that you'll lose money?
Sure.
And, somebody who was in property for many, many years, exactly that that's happened to lots of people who made investments that seem almost, they seem just too easy.
It was a sure shot. It was always going to come good. And people get surprised. Yeah.
We all get surprises. I'm sure people in 2007, 2008, when the chevra that were making huge sums of money in 2005 and 6 and a little bit into 2007, and they were living the high life and driving the fancy cars and they thought it would never end. They got a bit of a surprise in 2007, didn't they?
Hugely.
Property doesn't only go up, it can also go down. And just because it's worked for you 10 times or 50 times or 100 times over, it could just be a deck of cards and the whole thing in a second goes down. And so I think that people might not have, some people have a deeper sense of faith. Some people don't have as deep a sense of faith. But I believe anybody who will do anything religious has some sense of faith. Because if they didn't have it, there's no point in hedging your bets on that. You would never hedge your bets on something that you thought was nonsense. And the fact that you are hedging your bet on this means you believe it's not 100% nonsense. You might believe it's 90% nonsense, but for that 10%, you're hedging your bet. That's your 10% belief. Because if you believed it was 100% nonsense, you'd never hedge your bet on it. It's that 10% that allows you. And obviously, we need to try to take that 10% and turn it into 15 and 20 and 30, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what Clive was talking about before, is that it's a really difficult thing for people to achieve, to grow that from 5 to 10 to 20, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a life's work. But those people that are hedging their bets is because they have a 5 or 10% belief, not 100, but there is a 5 or 10% belief, which is why they're doing what they're doing. They're not just saying this is nonsense and rubbish. They aren't. And I think everybody needs to sort of dig deep, coming back to what we were saying before. You need to dig deep and say to yourself, well, where are those 10%? Where do I stand on that? If, like going back to the case, if somebody had a relative and they knew the relative was dying, I know people that have done all sorts of things. Suddenly start coming to davening, suddenly start saying Tehillim, suddenly start putting on tefillin. Some of them stopped eating in certain places until they knew how things would go. That's that 10% that's inside of you, that's inside every single individual saying, but maybe this is going to help.
Yeah,
because they have that 10%, but it's that 10% faith that they have. And it might only be 5% faith, but it's that 5% faith that they have. And the question, therefore, for those 10 days is, can I focus on that 5% for these 10 days and say to myself, maybe there's something more there that I'm not realizing. Maybe I need to be a little bit more focused. Maybe I need to realize that actually I care more than I actually believe that I care. And that's the other thing that people realize. Sometimes you realize you care more than you really gave yourself credit for. You might have, I'll tell you a very interesting thing that I had. I have a sister, but she had at one point a problem with a blood clot in her arm. And there was a time It was Erev Rosh Hashanah, and I remember my mother calling me and telling me that, they might amputate your sister's arm, and we need you to go daven. And I remember going to the kotel, because I was living in Yerushalayim at the time, and I remember getting to the kotel and crying bitter tears. And I said to myself, it's really strange, because I bickered and fought with that sister for so many years, and I never thought of myself as close to her. And suddenly, when my back was against the wall, I realized, hey, wait a second, maybe she does mean more to me than I thought. And that was to me, it was a real aha moment, where suddenly I realized I actually care about my siblings, my family members, more than I'm giving myself credit. And the same is true in our relationship with God. Maybe you actually care more than you give yourself credit, and it's just inconvenient. It's inconvenient to have to come to davening every morning. It's inconvenient to have to only eat at JS and mozzarella when there's
Other
hundreds.
kosher restaurants are available.
Other kosher restaurants available. You can go to Pagoda if you want to, especially because you're good with Daniel. You'll be like, hey.
Oh, I had to jump in there just before we documented.
Just before we document, right? But I remember having somebody come to me and say that, my spouse has become more religious, and we used to eat out in all sorts of places, and now he doesn't want to eat out with me anymore. And I'm not happy with that, because I really like going out to all these other places, and he's moved the goalposts, and that's not fair, right? But this individual suddenly has realized, hey, you know what? I care more than I thought originally. I care more about kosher than I thought. I care more about Shabbos than I thought. And I think that is really, really important, because sometimes we don't realize how much we care until we get to the point where it's too late to show that sometimes individual and sometimes that thing how much we care. So you're like, actually, Shabbos is really great. Okay, how many times do you catch Shabbos? Not at all. Oh, well, that's a shame. Because now you think Shabbos is so great, you got only one Shabbos left. What a shame. You could have made so much more out of Shabbos. And I think part of what really struck me about the Shabbos Project and Shabbat UK, et cetera, was trying to engage people and show them that actually Shabbos is a really beautiful, wonderful thing. Shabbos is not a pain, and Shabbos is not restrictive. Shabbos can be very liberating, and Shabbos can be very beautiful. And Shabbos is something that you can enjoy with all of its restrictions and feel a real liberty in it. See, I feel very free on Shabbos. I don't feel restricted on Shabbos at all. I love Shabbos. I love turning off my phone on Erev Shabbos. I love, the davening on Shabbos. I love the learning on Shabbos. I love the meals with my family on Shabbos and learning with my kids and with my chavros. I got so much stuff that I do on Shabbos. For me, actually, the long Shabbos in this summer that go till 11 o'clock, I love it. Yeah. I know a lot of people that are like, that's the worst. Hate the long Shabbos. Do you know what I mean? It's just like never ending. For me, it's like, it's great. I love it. I really enjoy those Shabbos. But it's because I've learned to enjoy them. And sometimes, and that's really what we're trying to do on Shabbat UK, trying to teach people how to enjoy this. And the problem is sometimes we don't do a good job at teaching people how to enjoy it, or we ourselves don't enjoy things or don't give ourselves credit for how much we enjoy them until it's too late to actually enjoy them. And that's part of the unfinished business that we have, is thinking about, what do I really care about? See, I put on this very, very proud face. I don't care about this and I don't care about that. But really, deep down, I do. The people that care the most are the people that tell you they care the least. I don't care what he says. How many times have you heard somebody say, I don't care what he says?
We know. I mean, those are the people that feel it most passionately.
Absolutely. And that's why they have to convince themselves by saying, I don't care what he says. So it's about your unfinished business. It's about thinking. It's about realizing that actually you care more for certain things than you give yourself credit. And it's then coming back and saying, like, so how do I make the most of that? How do I really make the most of that? Even in relationships, if you were to think about it, if somebody had only 10 days left to live, how nice would they be to their wife? You'd be really, really nice. All those dumb arguments you sometimes have with your spouse, they just go out the window. What would I do in those 10 days? I'd leave my job and take 10 days off to do my own thing. I don't know. No, honestly, it's a good question, Clive. You know, I guess I would spend a lot of time trying to fix up some of the things that I've done wrong. Spend maybe a lot of times learning, davening with the people that I love, letting people know how you feel about them. I think that's another very important thing. We don't let people know how we feel about them until sometimes it's too late. People are like, I love my father so much. Well, how often did you tell him? Never. So why'd you do that? I don't know. I just thought he'll always be around. Well, if you love your father so much, tell him today. Because what happens if he's not around tomorrow? You know what a terrible situation.
Like that. Tell your kids you're proud of them.
Absolutely. Tell every single one of your kids you're proud of them. And we need to learn, by the way, you need to learn how to be proud of your kids. Not every kid will make you proud the way you wanted them to make you proud. You know, your son, the lawyer, maybe never became the lawyer. And your son, the rabbi, never became the rabbi. You know, it can play this both ways, right? And you have to. And you have to learn to say, you know what? But I love you anyway. Because you're part of me, you're my child. I've invested so much in raising you, and I'm proud of you. I'm proud of who you are. I'm proud of who you become. And to be able to say that before you have 10 days left means that you live differently. See, when you live your relationships as if you had only 10 days left, you'd be nicer to people. You'd let them know how much they meant to you. You'd really change the way you dealt with people. Yes. Yeah. He's getting very emotional about what he's saying. Feels like he's getting emotional.
The dog
That's
is,
all right. Don't worry about it.
The dog's agreeing with you there.
He's agreeing with me. But if you knew that you only 10 days left, you'd really tell the people that mean something to you. You'd tell them, you know, you'd say very special things to them. And sometimes it's too late. You're like, oh, should have said it. Why didn't you? Should have gone to davening. Why didn't you? Should have learned more. Why didn't you? Should have been nicer to people. Why didn't you? Should have given more tzedakah. Why didn't you? There'll be lots of questions we ask of why didn't you? And if you live your life and you get to the end of your life and you say to yourself, oh, there's so many things I wanted to do. Why didn't I do them? That's a life full of regrets. And I've heard people say to me, Rabbi, I have no regrets. And oftentimes I look at people like that and say, you have no regrets? Then you've not thought properly. I don't know any person that's lived in this world properly that can honestly say to me that they have no regrets. I got so many regrets. There's so many things I should have done and I didn't do. There's so many things that I should not have done and I did anyway. How could you say you have no regrets in life? That's just not being honest. Instead of living with regrets, fix your regrets. You say, I regret A, B, C. I should have gone more often to davening. Well, start tomorrow, come more often to davening. Should have done more learning. Start tomorrow. Should have been nicer to my spouse. Start today. Whatever it is, there's always more chance. But to live your life and at the end to say I have no regrets means you've lived without thinking. Live your life to the best of your ability. Yes, there will be times you'll have regrets. But when you get to the end of life and you see, look at those last 10 days and you say, let's sprint, right? What was like the last 10 days is like saying it's the last 100 meters in a race. Go all out. Go all out. Because when you go all out, that's when you start to have the real feeling of like, I'm going to make it to the finish line. We all need to try to make it to the finish line. Life is like that. Let's try to make it to the finish line without having all these regrets. Think about it. Try to make sure that you live your life to your best. And any regrets you do have, sort them and sort them as soon as you can. Make sure that in the end you can say, I had regrets. I did have regrets. But anything that I regretted, I tried to sort afterwards.
I can't think of a better note to end on. Thank you very much. We've been going for a little over an hour. Thanks to everybody that tuned in again. Thanks to everybody that's watching us back later. And these are, Rabbi, we've got another couple of weeks that we're going to do before Yom Tov. We're going to carry on along the same sort of themes.
Yes.
And this year, a lot of the stuff that you're talking about is change, isn't it?
Yeah, we'd like to. I mean, I've spoken a lot about change. Tomorrow we have a lunch and learn, and anybody who would like to come to lunch and learn, everybody is invited to come. I mean, not all at once because I don't think we'll have enough bagels, but yeah, but you're invited to come. It's 12 o'clock in shul, and there's a bagel lunch afterwards. At 12:30 we have a discussion. Last week we spoke about change, and we're going to speak about that again. There's a share that I gave recently on improving your relationships for the new year. There's more. There's a lot more stuff coming out around that, and I believe that we look back at the last year and we say so much has changed. And we're saying the political situation has changed. Our situation in England has changed. All these things have changed. And the real question is, I don't care what's happened in England or what's happened on university campus. Have you changed? Are you a better person this year than you were last year? And if not, if everything else around you changed and you're just still the same bloke or the same woman that you were beforehand, you've missed a trick. You missed a big trick. We got it. You become every year. You got to say, this year I was better than last year. I did something extra this year I didn't do last year. We got to keep on showing God that I'm here for another year for a reason. Yes, last year I got a 60. Next year I'll get a 61. Right? You might not get 100 next year, but I can certainly improve it 1%. Because every time you improve it 1%, it's better. It's better. Life can be better than what we're doing right now. And we need to put in the focus and we need to try as hard as we can to live life better. And when we do that, we'll live our best life. Please God, we make the changes that we have to. Life's wonderful. Make the most of it.
Thank you very much. Have a good week, everybody. We'll
Thank
see
you. Thank you for joining. See you soon.